Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thaís Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Hello, beautiful humans. Thaís Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the podcast. Oh my gosh, we are in our second to last episode. Next episode will be the final episode of season 3 of Reclaim. This has been a really long season, about 9 months. So I'm looking forward to getting a little bit of a break and coming to you fresh in 2021 with some incredible continual conversations and guests and all of the things. Today I have Madison Morgan on the podcast. I actually just last week did an interview with her on her podcast, now live. You can go to the show notes or search Madison Morgan and you'll get her podcast. It's called Everything Belongs, the podcast. We had a really great conversation about integrity and worthiness in the coaching industry. This is something that I've been talking a lot about lately in lieu of my newest offering, mentorship for coaches who do depth work. And so that conversation was just so beautiful and inspired, and I adore Madison. In that podcast episode, I also share how Madison and I got to know each other, and it's a very unusual story. I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's really in alignment with this sense of the worthiness wound. So go to the show notes, go listen to that episode. And in this episode, Madison and I are going to continue to explore this idea of integrity in our work as coaches, on social media, in our lives, in our relationships. Madison shares a lot of her story about moving away from evangelical culture and reclaiming her own-ness, her own spirit, sexuality, etc. It's a really beautiful, potent conversation. I adore Madison. You're going to really love it. And if you are interested in learning more about the mentorship, if you are a coach who is seeking supervision and guidance on how to make sure that your work is trauma-informed, carries a social justice lens, if you want to make sure that you're doing a really good work with your clients and want some accountability and support, and also in the mentorship, of course, we do business work. In the group mastermind right now, we all of us launched roughly around the same time. So they learned a lot about my launch process of Worthy Women Rise. They are kicking ass in their business. It's just really, really exciting to watch them continually navigate what it means to really exist within their business. So that is a part of the conversation too. Worthiness is a part of the conversation too. It's not just about client work, though client work takes precedence, but it's about all aspects of business, of marketing, of being an entrepreneur, and what it means to do it with integrity and with with ethics and morality, and with the value system of people first. So you can learn more about the mentorship at thaissky.com/mentorship, or go to the show notes. The one-on-one mentorship is no longer available. That is sold out. So if you are interested in one-on-one work, you can join the waitlist, but there are spots available for the group mastermind. So you can learn more about the group mastermind by going to thaissky.com/mentorship. Okay, let me read to you Madison's bio. Madison Morgan is a 4 times international award-winning life coach, host of Everything Belongs, the podcast, a speaker, and a creator of Awaken Her Soul, a 14-week mentorship program designed to help women embody their worth, power, and fullness. Centered on self-responsibility and full expression, Madison coaches ambitious and creative women shed layers of old programming, keeping them small, and finally come home to their true selves. Madison has a degree in interpersonal communication with an emphasis in psychology from Missouri State University, has a certificate in conflict resolution, meditation, and legal mediation, and is proudly certified BYCA coach. You can learn more about Madison at madisonmorgan.com, also available in the show notes. Let's get into this conversation. All right, Madison. Hello. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So for everyone who's listening, Madison and I recorded an episode for her podcast, which came out, well, this is going to be whatever. The timing is different than we're recording it, than we're releasing it, but it's going to be released the week before this one is released. So they get to piggyback off of each other, which I'm really excited about. This has never done this before. I'm really excited about this.
Sister episodes.
Yes, sister episodes. So I had a lot of fun talking to you and your audience about my mentorship offering, which is currently out in the world. And in that, we talked a lot about worthiness, and we talked a lot about what it means to be in integrity with your work. And so this conversation I'm envisioning is going to be about how that looks like for you. Like, what does being in integrity in your work look like for you, and being in integrity with how you show up in the world. And I know a little bit about your story as you've navigated narcissistic abuse and religion and trauma. And it sounds to me that all of that has really pulled you into your own expression and being in integrity with your desire, your heart, your love, your wishes for the world. So for people who don't know much about Madison, share a little about your story, please.
Oh, thank you. What a fun intro. And yeah, definitely go listen to Thaís' episode on my podcast, because it is super juicy. And I mean, if you're interested in doing the membership, or you said the mentorship, it is like deep into what you'll find there. So thank you for having me. And my name is Madison Morgan. People might have previously known me as Madison Headland, because that was my name I built my entire business under for 5-6 years, and then got divorced. And so Morgan is the name I chose. So Madison Morgan. I'm a life coach, and I've struggled with what that means right now, which we talked about in the episode together, like about coaching, because all of my work with trauma has been for myself. Like, all of the work I've done with my own healing has been so I can show up as a clear container, as a coach, not as a trauma practitioner. And so it's really been interesting to see the rise of trauma-informed coaching happen, because being trauma-informed was always obvious, because it seemed obvious that to do deep work, I needed to be doing my own work outside of my business as a life coach. So I'm a life coach. I'm also a writer and a mystic and a poet and a person, and I post on social media, and I have a podcast and all of those things that are just everyone has now, basically. Thaís, where should I go? Should I go to my childhood? Should I go to college?
Where should we go? Well,
where should we go?
I would love to hear, like, what does being in integrity in your life look like right now?
Ooh. Right now, I am feeling, I'm coming off of a really intense year of grief. I'm what everyone talks about in your Saturn return. It is as it sounds. And got divorced, came out, went into quarantine. Then my dog died. And it was just like, what is going on? And all doing that, like, while still operating my business and trying to navigate shifting from an overworking place to no longer doing that, which meant confronting a lot of ways I had avoided my life through work. And now, a year out of leaving my then husband, noticing just how much I used my work and how much it lit me up to avoid my life. Because I got so many of my personal needs met from my job. It was a creative outlet. I could, in my writing personally, before anything would go out to the public, be like processing my feelings, feeling deeply understood by the writing process, and then get to share that through different lenses, through expertise to support other people. And then I met so many awesome friends through coaching too, that I ended up having an entire life separate from my life through my work. And there were so many reasons for that. And so much of it, like I naturally can be quite obsessed with any given project that I'm into, like full on blinders to everything else, like just narrow focus.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those horse things that on horses, I'm making the shape to you, but I don't know what they're called.
The blinders?
Is that what they're called? That feels like inappropriate language, but when your horse is in a horse race.
They're supposed to blind a horse. That's the whole point of them.
Yeah. Well, that's how I am.
Yeah.
In life with my work and with any creative project.
Now I have to Google that.
I know. I don't know what the appropriate term is. I'm like, I feel weird saying this, but I think that's what it's called.
Yes, it's called a horse blinder. They're
horse blinder.
Firm leather squares or plastic cups that attach to a horse's bridle or hood and prevent a horse from seeing behind or beside them.
Yep. Okay. So that's me with my work for the past 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And me with any project that I get into, any topic that I dive into. And I am realizing that those patterns stopped working for me probably a couple of years ago.
Mm.
And they're no longer in alignment with what I want for my actual life. Leaving my ex-partner didn't solve all of those problems for me like I had imagined they would, although leaving was the right choice for me. It didn't solve my inability to be in my own life in the way that really felt good. So taking a year and like truly grieving, not cutting ties, but removing some communication with my family as I do deeper healing work. Hopefully it's not a long-term not speaking to family, but while I'm in this season of healing. And I'm really trying to ask myself what working and creating from an energetic zero is, what working and creating and doing this job from overflow and not from sourcing for others, which is like a big piece of what I'm healing with my family and with my ex-partner. Like, I don't have to source for people. So what does creating from overflow really mean if I'm not extracting from myself in order to do that? So it's a big contemplation right now. I'm asking myself that. I'm saying yes to less things. Quarantine certainly helped me say yes to less things and see myself in different ways. So integrity, yeah. Seeing my somatic practitioner weekly. Not creating something unless I want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard when we have been so indoctrinated with the sense that we are an extension of other and our well-being is grounded on whether or not we are making another happy, fulfilled, satisfied, that it's really hard to then reconcile with this idea that we don't actually now need that source for our own identity, our own pleasure, our own joy.
Yeah, the amount of violation I was starting to feel, it's like once I realized on a family trip, it's a year ago now, this week, I went out to visit my family. I was newly divorced and newly come out all at the same time, visiting my family. And I remember just realizing the lack of boundaries that were just existent as everyone moved about the space. And I was like, holy shit. Can I say shit on your podcast?
Yes.
Okay, holy shit. Like, I feel violated. And it was the first time I had this word of like, I feel violated. And then it was kind of this overwhelming sense of, oh my gosh, I've never really understood what true consent was.
Yeah.
So I've been working and creating and serving from a well that was, even though I was doing all the self-care things and healing and going to therapy, still was violating myself because I had never really understood full consent.
Yeah.
And so getting back in touch with what is a true yes.
Yeah.
Like, I'd heard that concept before, but like I'm understanding it in a really new way.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too. thanks to you and some other people that I've connected with, I've become more intimately interested in different ways that people categorize people, such as Enneagram, such as human design, and like really coming to terms with like, what does it mean that I'm a generator? What does it mean that I respond to life? And therefore, like, what does it mean to find that deep yes, to find that space within me that, has been consistently violated and been told that my opinions, my desires, my wishes, my longings, as long as they didn't align with someone else's and therefore they were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be really hard to remove that patterning and that conditioning.
Yeah, I'm a generator also. And the responding, in especially like this summer with news and media, the amount I've wanted to respond and create something based on something that I don't even really want to be consuming. And even how much of my creating and writing will be like in response to something someone's like doing that upsets me. And then I'm like, now I have a new meme basically, but it's like branded really beautiful, but like born of spite. Like maybe I should redirect this creative energy. It's a real thing.
Yes. I mean, and I have always really doubted why I do this, like why I save people's, on Instagram, I save people's works that really activate me and I feel really problematic. But they energize the fuck out of me. I'll go through it. I'll be like, oh, right. I have lots of opinions about this. And then I go to town and write. And it feels so like I'm a part of something, But it can also be, if we're not mindful, then it's just another way that we're generating activity towards things that we don't like and don't want.
Yeah. It's like, I'm upset even thinking about how much I do this because the amount that like drama has hooked into me and things I don't like, that like it really does feel energizing, especially because I can produce from that place.
Yes.
And so I'm super curious in this season, like what would not being upset and creating feel like? Not that there's not plenty to be upset about right now, because there is, but I don't want to live my entire life in the state of upsetness, which just even like I realized, because I've been doing so much trauma work, writing a lot about my trauma on social media and like about my processing. And I come from, as you mentioned, a family that has narcissistic abuse and deep enmeshment cycles, addiction, and so on. And I was writing about this and like writing my response to how I'm processing it. And then I was getting a lot of clients who needed deep therapy work. And that's not what I do. And so it was super, having to sift through what is my art and then what is marketing for my life coaching business and like consulting. Super interesting.
Super interesting. And I think that it's important to be talking about this as to, entrepreneurs I cannot remove my art from my work. My art is my work. My work is my art. My writing is a part of my art. My coaching is a part of my art. How I show up in those ways is only a part of me. Right. And like, it's very easy. And in the beginning of my business, it very much felt like it was all of me that was being poured into my business. And so if it wasn't working in my business, it was a full reflection on me. It took a lot of work to unhook that this is a part of me. This art that I am offering the world is a part of my art, but it is not all of me. And there are other ways that I can be in my art that aren't for consumption, that there's a privacy to that. And I will also say, Madison, dating someone who is so intensely private has been one of the most confronting things in my entire life. He doesn't like, he has had very clear boundaries. This man is extremely bounded. I have a lot of respect for him in that. I cannot talk. Well, not I cannot. If I do, I will have consequences, as all boundaries are. I can do whatever I want. But he asks me no name, no face, no, almost no body parts. And like intimate experiences that we're having, he asks that I don't share that either. Madison, how do I do that? Considering that I share so much of myself online. it has been such an interesting experience for me.
Well, it's almost like it requires in a way for you to get to the potency of the lesson.
Yes.
And then you share that and not the story itself. My girlfriend is a lot more private and a lot more boundaried in this way than me as well. And she not lets me, again, I could probably do this anyway, but I respect her boundaries, say her name. But if it's like, there was one time I took a picture of her and us like by a bonfire and shared it. And she didn't bring it up for a little while, but it was a couple weeks later. And she's like, you posted that really sacred moment of us. That was really meaningful to me. And it had never occurred to me. I'm really open.
Yes.
And so these things, which was really huge for me, because I've had some friends tell me in the past that I'm so open about like myself and about the things that are hard for me and really just vulnerable and kind of raw, that they're like, that really intimidates me and scares me, that you're not going to hold my story as sacred. Mm-hmm. And so that has been a really big thing that I've been working with in relationships, because getting to the potency of what the lesson was versus just it can feel exposing, or like you're not treating that moment as sacred.
Yeah, I have my therapist has a social media presence. And it is one of the reasons why when I first started working with her, I was very excited to work with her. I was like, you get it. You get what it's like to have a social media presence and to have, because a lot of therapists don't. Most therapists don't. And so she is very much unique in that way. So I love that she understands some of my very unique challenges of having so much of my life be online. But yeah, I brought that concern as well. Like, because she also writes for like Psychology Today, like, are you going to write about me as an example of something? Am I going to, if you share an article and I read it, am I going to accidentally find myself in that? Even if you change identifiers and make it man versus woman, like if I see it, then I will be wondering if it's about me. You know, how sacred can you hold this space if you share so much of that? And so it's also something I've been thinking about with my own clients. How often, what do I share about them? If there's a lesson, how do I, like you said, like focus on that lesson and the potency of the lesson, but managing the story so it really maintains people's privacy. And in that, I've been learning about what it means for me to have privacy. That maybe I don't need to show all of myself in my business and in my work. Maybe there are parts of me that in integrity means that the world doesn't see it. And can I be okay not being an object to be consumed, right? Like not being a resource, not having to share all aspects and all lessons of my life all the time in order to somehow be relevant.
Yeah, that brings up so much for me, because one, my family of origin privacy is like not a thing.
Not a thing. Yeah.
I'm going to read your journal, going to talk to you about it. You're going to get in trouble for the whole thing. Yes. And then I went straight into evangelical culture, which is confessional culture. And if you aren't sharing with your accountability partner, which my accountability partner was 2 years older than me. She was my mentor. We read the Bible together. We read certain chapters of the Bible together every single week. And then I had to confess my sins to her, in particular sexual sins. Like, are you masturbating? If so, you need to tell me. And so it created this basically needing to expose yourself before other people expose you, because then in a prayer circle, it seems as though you can spot it before anyone else can spot it and publicly shame you. And I've noticed, especially in the church around leaders, if someone caught a leader doing something that they deemed inappropriate, that leader had to get up in front of the whole church and confess their sin and then step down from leadership. So it's actually been what's been happening with the call outs and people being held accountable in public ways has been super activating to some old trauma patterns for me that I've been processing, because I already probably have a tendency, it's getting better. I do have a tendency of oversharing as a means to call myself out before other people can call me out.
Yes.
And that is just super self-protective. Yes. It doesn't mean people know me. And that's what's really tricky about it, because people think that they know me because I've I guess, exposed myself. But that's the thing. It's not vulnerable for me to share information about me.
Yes.
It's vulnerable to be seen without consent.
Yes.
And so I've been really playing with this of, what about the fear of getting called out publicly is so activating. And the kind of punishment culture I was raised in, it was just so extreme. And there was so much shaming, and the way my parents did punishment was odd, but then the church, that whole element. And so I'm trying to figure out, or I guess not figure out, but I'm learning how to have privacy with myself and sacred things with myself, and not feel like that equates to lying to people.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I have also a very complex history of being seen, which is why, this is so fascinating to me, hearing you talk about it and seeing so much of myself in your story. Also with lying. I lied a lot as a child. It's amazing how when you do this work, it's not that the things go away, it's that they become more subtle, and it becomes like more layered and like super nuanced, and like you can almost like, it can just pass you by and you didn't even realize you did it. And then you're like, oh fuck, I just played out the same goddamn pattern. But yeah, like I started this whole thing with a blog about me and my yoga journey and my eating disorder. And so I shared my eating disorder like so proudly and loudly in the world, and my binges and what was happening in those moments. And people would say that I'm so brave and I'm so vulnerable. That never felt like vulnerability to me.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I notice myself get very, very animated, very talky, that's not me. People connect with that. They love that part of me. They see so much of themselves in that. They feel, but that's actually not me. And so much of my own vulnerability is actually dropping that facade and letting people see this, the messiness and the complexity and the part of me that hates being seen. Like that's vulnerability to me.
Yeah, that's exactly it for me. Like I built my entire business on showing up and doing Instagram lives every week, and it's such high energy. And I'm just like, why am I starting to hate everyone, including myself? Like, oh my God. And there's an element of that can be really fun that I like to tap into. But I think letting the dust settle and it being super like raw in the sense that like just you and I are talking right now, and it's not high. It's like very dropped in center. And for me, learning to hold that place, because that's who I am with my friends and my family and my clients one-on-one. But I will say in the beginning, I felt like I still had to amp up my clients. Yeah. I felt like I had to be like some sort of like hype person.
Yeah.
Hype girl, is that what they call it? Yeah. I think, to bring up the Enneagram, since you brought it up earlier, I think we have really similar Enneagram dynamics. Mm-hmm. Didn't you say that you were exploring 4, wing 3?
Yes, I'm exploring 3 and 4, and I'm not sure which one would be my predominant and which one would, they both really resonate in such different ways. Yeah. So I'm not sure which one's predominant, but yeah, the two of them, those two dynamics are very real for me.
Yeah, I know because my girlfriend's teachers teach sacred Enneagram, and they consider it so sacred, and that they don't teach it until you're 30. They in the sacred Enneagram tradition, you're really only supposed to be talking about it in sacred circle and typing within a sacred circle. So self-typing isn't really a thing. You're actually like supposed to be typed alongside people who are like listening to your talking style, and then they support you in typing. And then it was supposed to be used as a therapeutic tool. Yeah. So it's really interesting with all of the memes, because I was mistyped for, probably 8-9 years since I've learned about Enneagram. And I thought for sure I was a 7. And a lot of the reasons that 7 and 3 for me are really similar, like I was talking to her teachers and they were like, yeah, they share those things in common. And it sounds like there's like too much pride in you being a 7 for that to stick, because whenever you find out the true type, there's like a sense of shame in it a little. Yes. Like, oh, why does this hurt so much? And
and I think that's why I even say that I'm not fully confident that I'm a 3 or 4, because like calling myself a 4 seems so painful. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's how I feel about 3.
4 is like all about a core narcissistic wound in the world of psychotherapy, but the sense of like not being, well, narcissism from the origins of the word, not the way it is now. But anyway, the core, it being like not feeling special, right? Everyone deserves to feel special and to feel prioritized. And if they get enough of that, then they don't need that as an adult. It's a developmental milestone. If you didn't get enough of that, then you tend to then continue to need to feel special as an adult. And like, that is so embarrassing.
It sucks.
Sucks. That's embarrassing. It's like,
that's like baby you, like, hold me.
It's so real for me, and it plays out. So I love Enneagram, and like I think it was like your energy that like really got me into it. There's something really cool though, what you said that I want to just type into, which is there's all of these things, astrology, human design, Enneagram, and I think all of them were originally meant to be a healing knowing, right? Like a reverent landing, a place of two people or a group of people tapping into naming what is here, but not kind of labeling yourself, sticking yourself with a label and moving on, right? It was supposed to be a tool to facilitate the healing. And it is a bummer now that so many of these things, including like deep inner healing, has become so trendy.
Memeified.
Yeah, memeified. And like I see now, so how long have you been a coach now, Madison?
7 years this fall.
So you've been around the circuit for a while. You've seen how Instagram has evolved.
It's really shifted in the last 1.5 2 years.
And Instagram therapy was not a thing. So coaches held that. Coaches did that. Therapy was not online at all. Now that so many therapists are online, now I'm noticing that that's driving coaches to then feel like they have to then do. So like, there's just so like, this is one of the things that like I save a lot because it really stirs me up.
That you're like typing in rage.
Oh my God. If I see another list, if I see another goddamn list, right, of like 5 things, 5 ways, 5 steps, 10 ways, 10 things. And it's like, I get how helpful they are. Obviously, I can hold that complexity. I know that it can be so helpful for people, but it feels to me like it so trivializes the complexity of this work. Yeah. And every time I post something, people will ask me how. But how, Thaís? But how? And I'm like, I don't know your how.
Yeah.
Your how is different than her how. Like, I don't know how for you. It depends on you. And I don't know you. How am I supposed to tell you how? There is no 5-step process. And like, you can even tell how activated I'm getting about this. I'm going to take a breath and let you take over for a minute while I breathe into
it. Maybe we should just have a moment of silence while you just like have some feelings about it. I feel honestly very similarly. And I think the thing that worries me more than like people worrying about how, because even I have a program and I'm like, let's figure out how, in week 4, everyone's like, but wait, when are you gonna tell me exactly specifically how? I'm like, the questions I'm asking are the how. Yeah. Trust me. Trust me that this process is an unfolding process. The thing that I think the how questions will always be asked. What terrifies me more than anything is that everyone is thinking they're doing whatever the work is because they're consuming memes, and then we all are gathering a lot of knowledge about the human condition based on current understandings of it, which if we've looked at the field of psychology over the last 100 years, we see that it is rapidly changing. Yes. Diagnostics are rapidly changing. And then people are walking about thinking that they are trauma experts or speaking to other people's narcissism or diagnosing people or being like, oh, I already know that. But there's like zero embodiment of it.
Yes.
And even embodiment isn't the new one. Everyone's like, get embodied. And it's like, I'm like, that's the work that I'm doing with my somatic practitioner. I think this is really important. I think it was missing from my journey for a long time. And learning about it only went so far.
Yes. It's just that there's doing the work and then there's reading about the work. And that's two very different things.
And I love to read.
Yeah. And you know that it's two very different things, because the process I see my clients go through in front of me is radically different than the process I see when we're reading a meme and scrolling. Like, it's two different things.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see this with the rise of mindset coaching and the coaching industry, and then CBT in the therapy world, where it's these modalities that are so marketable and so snazzy and so enticing that people fall under the guise that with just some simple shifts and tweaks of just some positive thinking and just knowing a little bit about this, then things are going to change. And listen, who knows how much of a change is going to happen? Everyone is in a different process, but I think it just devalues the art of this work, which is inherently an interpersonal work. It can't be done in a silo. And so self-healing has to be held lightly, because most healing is going to happen in the context of groups, one-on-one with people. It's not going to happen in the reading. The reading can guide us, but if we're not, like you said, embodying the work, if we're not bringing it into our lived experience, then it's bypassing, right? And it's tantalizing. Right now, the big thing is narcissism. The thing before that was psychopathy, right? Like, everyone is a psychopath. The thing before that was like vanity, like everyone's vain. You know, I mean, like, we've always had labels to categorize the bad guys, right? The bad objects, the bad people in the world. Now you're a narcissist, boom, checked, canceled out, done. Can't even, not even going to talk to you anymore. And it's like so much harder to hold the fact that every perpetrator is also a victim. Yeah. Every victim is also a perpetrator. There's complexity within every relationship. And while we're naming things as this or that, we're missing on so much nuance. And that's where the healing lies.
Yeah. You just said so many things that I feel really passionately about. Because the awareness that I had a family member who was doing narcissistic abuse in my life, I thought that was the problem in my reality. And they were the one I was always blaming for all of my problems, until I realized, one, I repeated all of those same traumas to my younger sibling. Because I was the oldest and she was the youngest. And the parent who embodied, I guess, what would be stereotypically the codependent, that family dynamic caused so much more subtle traumas that I had no idea were going on, because it was really easy for them and for our culture to be like, the narcissist and the abuser, the overt abuser are the bad guy, and everyone else is just a victim, when everyone in the family system, in my family system, was playing along, including me, until very recently, when I was like, whoa, if I don't eject myself and figure this out. And I wanted to speak to self-healing, because I think this is so interesting. I think it has to go both and. Because
absolutely.
It had, like, in my journey and what I see with my clients is sometimes the system that you're in, there are no healthy people to attach to.
Yes.
And so where do you go? Therapists, group programs, and eventually there has to, and the reason why I think self is so important is there has to be a sense of self-responsibility, and your therapist can't do the work for you.
Yeah.
No matter how many group programs you take, or pay for, because not everyone takes programs, they buy. You have to show up and actually be willing to be open. Yeah. And it is deeply fucking uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It is not. And it's like some of the most beautiful, liberating, connected work that I see people do in a group space, when everyone's saying, I'm willing to show up here and take responsibility, even though this sucks, that I have to do this. That self-responsibility creates a group dynamic where I think healthy attachment is possible.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. It's interesting, because that's what I think. That's the definition, I think, of healing, right? Healing is an internal responsibility within the context of external support. And I think so when we say self-healing, that's redundant. And I think that's then, it's kind of like saying ATM machine, you know, people are like, it's not ATM, the M is machine. So you're saying ATM machine. It's kind of like that in that.
Like a Kleenex tissue.
Yeah. Yes. Like a Kleenex tissue. It kind of implies that there is healing that can be done without self. That's not possible. Healing requires the self, requires you to bring it. No one can do that. No, healing cannot happen without self-engagement. And so then we perpetuate self-healing, which I think serves to really perpetuate this idea that journaling and a few books are going to heal your trauma, right? That a few books and a few memes on Instagram are going to eradicate, you know, really entrenched, deeply complicated relational patterns. And that's where I get a little frustrated with meme culture, because I am finding myself consistently feeling like a resource to be consumed, consistently feeling like my work has to be packaged in a way that can be received through a very narrow lens of Instagram, feeling like my art is limited and diminished because if I don't make this in a catchy, memey, one phrase, one thing, you know, then no one's going to see my thing and then my business is going to flounder. So that's been what I'm navigating, which is like, how do I learn the medium of which I am choosing to express my art without diminishing my potency, right? And like my integrity and my excitement at talking about this and doing this work.
Well, I think we can't really talk about that self-extraction without talking about how social media has trained us to be expectant that we actually deserve the attention, hearts, likes, affirmation from the people that we follow, and that they're not a good whatever they are unless they're replying and commenting and giving us free shit. And I think that's really odd. You know, like think to 15 years ago, did you ever drive by businesses and like are pissed that they're not giving you free content because you drove by? It is really bizarre. And I think there is something to providing value and showing. And I think the way that I understood the social media in the beginning of like when I was doing Instagram was that you share a little bit of yourself so that people know what to expect from you.
Yeah.
And in the last 2 years, it has turned into something else that I see people being mad whenever they can't afford one of my offerings. And it's like, you should make this accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
Like if I made this 9-person mastermind accessible to everyone, I would not exist anymore.
Yeah.
It does. There's not enough of me for that to be possible. And then I think it, as a consumer also, because I'm a creator and a consumer, it makes me ask, why do I feel so entitled to people's attention and energy?
Yes.
And when they don't respond in the way that I want, why does that hurt my feelings?
Yeah.
And what is there for me? What did I want? What validation was I looking to get? It's complicated.
Yeah, it's so complicated. This just happened. There was a person or somebody I follow on Instagram that I really respect, and I commented with the expectation that they were going to see that comment and be like so blown away by the insightfulness of that comment that they were then going to go to my profile and then see, you know, blown away by how amazing my content is, that they were then going to follow me. Obviously. That they were then going to follow me. And
did they follow you?
No.
How do you feel?
Well, you know, I'm enlightened. I don't feel anything. No, I feel like, you know, I initially was like a little disappointed. Like she liked it and she responded in a very affirming way, which is like, it was great. But then she didn't follow me. So then it becomes like, yeah, it's that same inquiry. What did I expect in this transaction? Why did I comment from a lens of this being a transaction instead of it being a genuine relating? And why is it that so often when I comment, it is a transaction for me? If I comment on friends, it's because I want them to know that I love them. You know, it's transaction. It's, I want you to know I see you, I love you. I love you. Love bomb, right? Is that genuine Because is anything that I do on this platform truly genuine? Or is there a part of me that's also hoping that by commenting on my friend's thing, that their followers are going to see me? And, so it's like, it's hard to detangle from all of that. And I don't know if you even can truly detangle, just like capitalism, how much can you detangle from these corrupt systems, white supremacy, etc. But it's important that we sit with that complexity.
Yeah.
Because I think that it makes us more mindful of what is it that we're really wanting.
And I think it feels, thank you for sharing, because I think we've all been in situations like that where we're like, see me. And like, they didn't see me. Why? This kind of hurts. Damn it. No. But also I think that they're like, for me, shifting Instagram to be something that like, I want to relate. And I think actually I felt really great with Instagram until about 3,000 followers. Like I really felt this sense of community. And then I felt my inability to sustain that and to create something that felt like I really could show up in that way. And, people jumping in my DMs, and I'm not a therapist. There technically isn't the rule that I don't like, therapists can be like, it's illegal for me to do this. I can't, I can't do this. I'm like, it's not illegal. I just don't want to. Right. So what does that look like when people jump in my DMs and they're like, this just happened to me and this just happened to me. And this is what I need, or I just want someone to see me. And I'm like, there are so many people in the world that need to be seen. What is my highest and best impact to make sure that like the most people using the skills and gifts that I have that the most real version of that is actually possible. Right. And sometimes that means less interactions. I just turned my commenting off, or not commenting, like the replies from people that I don't follow off. And I do that every now and then when I'm just feeling like kind of bombarded. And, it's a door that I keep open. And then I'm like, if I'm frustrated that I have DMs, then that's my responsibility to do something about, because if they're there, then I'll read them and I'm like, okay, this isn't working. Yeah. And, for me, it's the continual unhooking from what am I afraid of is going to happen if I leave those there? What am I afraid of is going to happen if I can't reply? And for me, so much of it is rooted in saviorism, which is white supremacy culture. Yeah. And it's not real relating. Yeah. So for me, it's been continually passing back when people are like, are you the savior? Are you the one I've been looking for? What are those steps? Can you help me? Like, I have things that could help, and I'm not the savior. I'm unwilling to take that place in your life. Yeah. Yes. And just handing it back and knowing that some people aren't going to see that as an empowering thing. Right. And it's also, I don't really believe in empowerment. I think power is. And so it's not my job to empower other people. Yeah. Getting a little meta. But I love, actually, the concept of empowerment really derives from Paulo Freire, who was a socialist, a sociologist, although maybe he was a socialist, who knows. Just making claims. Making claims here. A sociologist who studied Brazilian tribes, Brazilian communities, indigenous communities, and was attempting to understand and figure out with them what would it take for them to be able to navigate the imposed systems that were put upon them, such as the Brazilian government, right? Like, how do we support these cultures empower themselves through their own community so they have the support that they need within their community, and so that they can then push back against oppressive systems. So it's interesting that that's where the original concept of empowerment came from, and now it's become basically like a cheerleader for white women to do whatever they want, right? Like, be bossy, be a Karen, do you. And like, who is saying be a Karen? Goodness, I'm not following. But isn't that what empowerment really is, though? I mean, look at the archetype of a Karen, right? Yeah. And tell me how that's different from not your and I's definition of empowerment, but the coaching industries and the systems at large concept of empowerment, right? I mean, we're saying to women, listen, you've been oppressed for thousands of years, now have a say. These women are having a say. They are saying lots of things, but feeling empowered, feeling entitled, right? Feeling entitled to say all these things. It doesn't feel very powerful to me, though. It almost, Like,
it stems from a huge wound. I mean, that's obvious. But if that's the point, right, Madison, is that like if empowerment isn't embodied, it's not power. It's coming from wound, and that's the predominant issue. We're looping it all back around to the coaching industry and the self-improvement industry at large, which is consume, digest, but don't embody, right? Like keep losing yourself in the wound of an attempt to be this big empowered person, but really you're not doing the work that's so hard of slowing down and coming in.
It's just shoulders up kind of empowerment.
Yes.
And
clearly problematic for all the reasons that I hope everyone that's listening to this understands.
Yeah.
The Karen is, it's a problem. It's a really problematic and violent, right, harmful archetype of the white woman.
It's interesting because the Karens I know in real life don't subscribe to female empowerment. So it's an interesting leap for me to be like, oh yeah, and them, what is it called? The white self-empowerment. There's like a name for it or something. Kelly Dales, she like coined a phrase for it. You know, the Karens I know are not even there. Like that would be a step forward in a way.
Interesting.
To realizing that there's something wrong with being the darling of the patriarch, which I think in some ways both are, and I think in a lot of ways both are. But I think of the women in my family who are Karens, because I have women in my family who are Karens, and the women in my churches who are Karens that I know they're not questioning society's norms. They're not figuring out how they're powerful. They are doing what they can to submit to authority to not get in trouble. And so I actually remember starting coaching and leaving evangelicalism around the same time. And I had that same mentor who I had to confess my masturbation to. She sat me down at a Panera and was like, she asked me to coffee, which I had a bad feeling about, but I went anyway. And I got there. I know, right? And she had her big Bible like sitting on the table, like she'd been there like prepping. And I was like, fuck, like this is exactly this is the ambush I was expecting it to be and was hoping it wasn't. And it turned into this like pointing her finger at me and shouting at me to say the name of Jesus out loud, say his name. Like you are basically following your sinful flesh because you started a business and you're trying to empower yourself, but your power is only found in God. And like you should quit your job and go love your husband. And so it's interesting because that was actually like that female empowerment that got me out of evangelicalism, because there are still, and I think sometimes in the liberal coaching space, there's so many movements beyond just how entangled people are with these narratives that you are meant in evangelicalism, your good deeds are as good as filthy period rags. Like, and that is scripture. And so there's so many layers to why that's like really messed up, but there's nothing you can do to be good enough. You are born in sin. You are born unworthy. You are only good because of Jesus. And it's God, Jesus, your husband, you, then your kids, then the animals, then the earth. And there's an innate hierarchy. And so for some of those women to even move to being like, do I have a say in anything?
Sure.
It's so that, which anyone who's moving in the direction of like true liberation, which anyone who leaves that evangelical path is looking for true liberation, will end up finding something rooted in, I don't know anyone who's left evangelicalism that doesn't end up wanting to deconstruct systems of power, like white supremacy, because once you see one of those systems, you know all of them. They're just directed at different people. And so if you liberate yourself and get liberated from that kind of structure, religion, whatever religion, because there's many, not just evangelicalisms that do this, you kind of jump out into the world and you see how obvious patriarchy is and how obvious white supremacy is and how obvious ableism is, which honestly was the longest one for me to catch up to. Of all of them, of all of the isms, I guess. But yeah, I guess it's interesting because in my mind, the church had already made those women wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
The white empowerment guru women.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, you're giving me a lot to think about, because I obviously have not given this a lot of thought. This had just kind of birthed from our conversation. So, I mean, there's just so much that we can unpack here about the archetype of the Karen, because I think you're right. I think we're talking about two different kind of archetypes of women. Both, I think, have similar core issues. I think it's just the way that it's manifesting and playing out and whatever.
One has a sense of false empowerment, it seems, like, or a sense of false power, or maybe even the difference I'm seeing is the evangelical woman that I've known understands that she is not meant to be as powerful as her husband or as God. And so the patriarchy is internalized, and she's not trying to get power along with her husband. Her power is in her submission, because in the submission and in the goodness of following those rules, that's how she's cared for. And I think on the other side, and the Karen that you were speaking of, it's, if I'm as powerful as a white man, then I am powerful. Right. And so it's a different way of getting power, which I would be super curious how that looks like from a trauma response. One being like a super fawn, placating, people-pleasing, like docile response, and the other being potentially parasympathetic, but you could even correct me if that doesn't sound accurate. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think all of this is really interesting, and power over, power under, and the complexities in which it lands in our body is also really interesting. I feel like we could just continue to have this conversation forever. This has felt so good to just be in this space with you and talk to you. And I am just continually, inspired by you and honored to be, in your sphere of knowing you. Love the work that you're doing. And I just, you're a very grounded soul, and I can just tell that you're really embodying this work and doing the work of embodiment. So it's just like really beautiful to witness you and see you in the world, and to get my little slice of that, my little transactional slice. No, oh my gosh. Well, I think what we're doing is like real relating. Oh yes. No, this is in the guise of a podcast. Yeah. Thank you for all those kind words too. It means a lot. And as someone who is always like, I'm too young, I'm too small, I'm all these things, I'm not enough, blah, blah, blah. There's a satisfaction in feeling seen as enough by you. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for everything, Madison, for your brilliant work. I will link all the things in the show notes for people to check out you and check out your work. And here's to continually navigating what it means to be seen and what it means to be our fullest, in the most integrity self in our personal lives and in our public lives. Yes.
Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thaís and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.